Good morning, everyone. We'll just say a word before we begin here. Our condolences, our prayers go out to the Cheney family. Of course, we've had the loss now of former Vice President. As you know, Dick Cheney served as Vice President. He served as a Secretary of Defense. He served as a congressman, of course, from Wyoming, and as the youngest chief of staff to any president in the history of the country.
On November 4th, former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney died at the age of 84, following complications from pneumonia and long-standing cardiac and vascular disease. For much of his adult life, Cheney's health mirrored his politics, battered, unyielding, and sustained by an iron will.
For 8 years, Dick stood by my side and always did what was right for our nation. Could not have asked for a better vice president than Dick Cheney.
Even a heart transplant in 2012 couldn't soften the image many held of him. A man seen by some as a patriot and by many others as the cold architect of an era of endless bloody war.
When I think of Dick Cheney, I of course think of the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan and how many U.S. lives were lost and others, and the failure of those efforts. So I think Dick Cheney's legacy will be a reevaluation of American global dominance and the effort to impose hegemony across the world and police the world in a way that's probably not sustainable.
Few American leaders have left such a divided legacy. Cheney was not merely a vice president. He redefined the office, transforming it from a ceremonial seat into a command post for America's war on terror. Behind the scenes of the George W. Bush administration, Cheney pulled the levers of power that would lead the U.S. into the invasion of Iraq, a war built on the phantom menace of weapons of mass destruction.
An organization like Al-Qaeda and those who hold or are proliferating knowledge about weapons of mass destruction. So the concern is very real, it's very great, and we need to find ways as we go forward to make certain that the terrorist never acquires that capability and that it can never be used against the United States or the United Kingdom or our allies.
None were ever found. Still, Cheney maintained until his death that the war was justified. His influence stretched back decades. As Defense Secretary under President George H.W. Bush, 1989 to 1993, Cheney oversaw U.S. victories in Panama and the Persian Gulf, even as he began scaling down military spending after the Soviet collapse.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against Al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan.
Yet when he returned to public life under Bush's son in 2001, it was with a very different mission: to expand American power abroad and at home. Between those two eras, Cheney led Halliburton, the oil and engineering giant that would later profit immensely from the very wars he helped to wage. Under his leadership, Halliburton became a symbol of the privatized military-industrial complex, a world where war and profit were intertwined. Cheney was a key figure in the early history of the privatized military industry, wrote author Peter Singer. It now encompasses hundreds of firms, thousands of employees, and billions of dollars in revenue. Back in Washington, Cheney pursued a long-held conviction that the presidency had been weakened since the Watergate scandal. His answer was to reclaim power for the executive branch, using the post-9/11 fear and chaos to expand surveillance, secrecy, and the state authority to unprecedented levels. The Patriot Act, which he championed, gave the U.S. government sweeping new powers of spying and detention, powers often turned against Muslim Americans under the guise of national security. Meanwhile, abroad, Cheney's war on terror metastasized into torture, black sites, and indefinite detentions. Under his watch, the U.S. employed so-called enhanced interrogation techniques at Guantanamo Bay and CIA facilities worldwide, practices that violated international law and left a lasting stain on America's reputation. Many of those detained were never charged with a crime.
Chris, my sort of overwhelming view is that the enhanced interrogation techniques were absolutely essential in saving thousands of American lives, in preventing further attacks against the United States, and giving us the intelligence we needed to go find al-Qaeda, to find their camps, to find out how they were being financed.
The consequences of Cheney's policies remain staggering. The Iraq War, waged on false pretenses, cost trillions of dollars and hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of lives. It destabilized West Asia, fueled the rise of extremist groups like Daesh, and left behind a generation of veterans scarred in body and mind. Domestically, the financial and moral capital spent on war hollowed out the very foundations of the society Cheney claimed to defend.
Saudi Arabia is making raids and arrests. Libya is dismantling its weapons programs. The army of a free Iraq is fighting for freedom, and more than 3/4 of al-Qaeda's key members and associates have been detained or killed.
In Cheney's worldview, the U.S. could and should strike first against any possible threat. This became known as the 1% doctrine. If there was even a 1% chance of danger, America must act as if it were certain. That logic reshaped foreign policy, turning preemption into permanent posture and suspicion into strategy.
The Cheneys are die-hard globalists and warmongers who have been plunging us into new conflicts for decades, spilling American blood and spending American treasure all over the world.
To his critics, Cheney embodied the dark heart of American power, a man who saw the world in absolutes and acted without remorse. To his admirers, he was a realist who understood that strength, not sentiment, secured the nation's safety. But as time passes, it is the costs of his choices, not the intentions, that define his legacy.
Because he was very much a proponent of some of the more controversial policies of, the George W. Bush administration, whether you're thinking about sort of enhanced interrogations or torture, essentially, if you're thinking about sort of surveillance, the Patriot Act, or surveillance also, domestic spying on Americans, and of course, his most hawkish line on the war in Iraq and being largely unapologetic about it. I think many of those issues, played into that perception of Dick Cheney not being the most sympathetic character to his opponents.
From the oil fields of Halliburton to the war rooms of Washington, Cheney's career charted the rise of a new kind of empire, one driven by fear, technology, and private profit. The surveillance state, the normalization of torture, the unchecked growth of private military contractors, all trace their roots to his years in power. Even the politics of resentment and fear that later fueled Donald Trump's rise bear Cheney's fingerprints. Dick Cheney lived much of his life with a damaged heart. In 2012, medicine gave him a new one. But in much of the world, especially across West Asia, many believed he never had one at all.